Welcome to Graveyard Mile, where the past never stays buried, and every story has a chill waiting for you. If you love late-night mysteries, haunted places, and spine-tingling legends, you're in the right place. Hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a walk through the shadows. The Ramirez's house glowed like a Christmas card. Every gable and window shimmered with white lights, and the yard was dressed with inflatable reindeer that swayed in the December breeze. From inside came the scent of cinnamon and roasted ham, laughter spilling into the cold night like warmth escaping through a cracked door. It was December 24th, and for the 12th year in a row, the family had gathered here, a tradition no one dared to miss. Lucia Ramirez, the matriarch, had decorated every inch of her home as though it might make the world outside forget its problems. Her son David and his wife, Letitia, had arrived early to help. The tree stood proud in the living room, its branches heavy with silver tinsel and family ornaments, each one holding a memory, some sweet, some bittersweet. 8-year-old Katrina was the heart of it all, bright-eyed, talkative, and dressed in red pajamas covered in snowflakes. She buzzed around the adults, tried to catch a glimpse of her presence under the tree. Her Uncle Sam joked that she had Christmas radar. "Santa's coming early tonight," she said, her grin wide and sure. "I can feel it." Everyone laughed, except her mother, Letitia, who smiled but looked away. There had been too many arguments lately between her and David, between David and his father. The kind of arguments that start about money and end about everything else. The holidays had a way of forcing smiles over cracks that ran deep. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the bare branches of the maple trees that lined Birchwood Lane. Across the street, a few neighbors were packing up after their own celebrations. It was nearing 11:30 p.m., and the night had settled into that quiet stillness unique to Christmas Eve, the moment when time itself seems to hold its breath. Inside, Lucia poured more wine, turning the music up. "Come on, everyone. It's almost midnight. One more toast." David raised his glass, his smile more convincing now. "To family, the one thing that never burns out." They clinked glasses, the crystal chime filling the air. But somewhere behind that laughter, Letitia felt something, a prickling sensation at the back of her neck, as though the warmth of the house had thinned. She turned toward the window. A figure stood at the end of the driveway. At first, it was just a silhouette against the snow, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in red. She squinted, expecting to see a neighbor in costume, but then the figure moved closer, stepping under the light. It was Santa Claus. He carried a large, shiny red sack slung over one shoulder. His beard glistened like frost, and his boots left deep impressions in the fresh snow. There was something deliberate about his steps, too heavy, too steady. Letitia blinked. "Katrina," she said softly, "come away from the window." But the little girl was already there, pressing her hands to the cold glass. "It's him. Mommy, it's Santa." "Sweetheart, no." The doorbell rang. Everyone froze. Lucia laughed nervously. "Who on earth would be out at this hour?" David, half drunk, chuckled. "Maybe your Christmas miracle, Mom." Letitia whispered, "Don't answer it." But Katrina was already running toward the front door. The bell rang again. Two sharp notes that echoed unnaturally through the house. The lights seemed to dim, just slightly, and in that subtle darkness, the warmth began to feel suffocating. "Katrina," Letitia shouted, but her daughter was already standing on her tiptoes, unlocking the latch. When the door opened, the night poured in, cold, silent, endless. Santa stood there, framed in the doorway, his face hidden in shadow. The red suit looked old, scorched at the edges, and the smell, faint but distinct, of burnt metal and something chemical drifted in. Katrina smiled. "I knew you'd come." Santa didn't speak. He just tilted his head, slowly, almost curiously, as if studying her. Then, in a voice that sounded both distant and hollow, he said, "Have you been good this year?" Letitia's heart seized. She moved fast, pulling Katrina back just as a metallic clatter echoed, something heavy hitting the floor. Lucia gasped. "What's going on?" David called, stepping forward. "Hey, who are you?" The man reached into the sack. For a moment, everyone thought it might be presents, a joke, some weird neighbor's prank. But when he lifted it out, the gleam of metal caught the hallway light. Letitia screamed. David lunged forward, knocking over a chair, and in the chaos, the front lights flickered out completely. The house plunged into shadows, illuminated only by the blinking Christmas tree. And then, silence. When the lights flicked back on seconds later, the doorway was empty. The sack lay on the ground, unzipped. Inside was something strange. A broken music box, its gears whirring faintly, playing a warped version of Silent Night. The tune crackled, slowed, and stopped. Lucia clutched her chest. What did he want? No one answered. The front yard was empty, snow blowing softly into the porch light. But out on the sidewalk, just barely visible, a line of footprints led away, large, deep, and burning faintly red at their edges, as though the snow itself had been singed. Later that night, when the police were called, they found the footprints continued halfway down Birchwood Lane before simply stopping. No direction, no trace. It was as if the figure had vanished into thin air. And yet, hours later, neighbors would claim they saw a flicker of red moving between the houses. Some swore they heard a faint jingle, like bells carried on the wind. Others said they smelled smoke. But in the Ramirez home, Letitia couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the voice again, soft, hollow, echoing in her head. "Have you been good this year?" She didn't know why, but she whispered back in the dark, "No." And somewhere, out beyond the streetlights, something shifted in the snow. By morning, Birchwood Lane no longer looked festive. Yellow tape cut across the Ramirez lawn like a wound, and would have been a glowing display of reindeer and twinkling lights now blinked unevenly, half the bulbs dead from trampled cords. The air smelled of melted plastic and snow that had been stepped on too many times. Detective Patrick Holloway, Pat, to everyone who'd ever worked a night shift with him, stood on the porch taking notes. He'd seen plenty of break-ins gone weird around the holidays, but this one had a chill that didn't come from the December air. "No forced entry," the first responder said. "Just that thing." He pointed to the hallway floor where the music box still sat. Its lid was cracked open, the little ballerina frozen mid-spin. Pat crouched beside it. The brass was scorched on one side, as though it had been held over a flame. When he turned the key, the tune wheezed to life again, half Silent Night, half mechanical cough, before stuttering into silence. He closed it carefully. "Bag it." Letitia watched from the sofa, a blanket around her shoulders. Her face was pale, eyes unfocused. The paramedic had offered a sedative. She'd refused. Katrina sat beside her, silent since the night before. Pat stepped over. "Mrs. Ramirez, I know this is hard, but you said he was dressed as Santa, right?" She nodded once. "Tall, broad, carrying a red sack?" Another nod. "Did he say anything besides that question?" Letitia swallowed. "Just, have you been good this year? That's all." Pat wrote it down. The words looked ridiculous in his notebook, like lyrics scrawled by a drunk mall Santa. But the prints outside weren't ridiculous. He'd never seen anything like them. He walked back out. The crime scene techs had dusted the porch. Nothing. Yet the snow showed clear impressions leading halfway down the street. Every step crisp until suddenly gone. No turn, no drag marks. The trail simply ended, as if the man had stepped off the world. Could be melting, one of the younger officers said. Pat looked at the prints again. The edges were burned. Melted from underneath, maybe, he muttered. That afternoon, the news vans arrived. Reporters leaned into their microphones under falling snow, rehearsing the same line. A Christmas Eve intruder dressed as Santa. By evening, half the county had locked their doors. The other half were checking costume shops for red suits. At the precinct, Pat pinned a photo of the footprints to the evidence board. Next to it, he added a snapshot of the music box, its scorched lid glowing under flash. A crime lab report was clipped beneath. Residue, traces of magnesium, and an unidentified accelerant. Temperature exposure, greater than 900 degrees Celsius. He frowned. 900? What? Did he walk through a forge? His partner, Detective Ray Miller, rolled her chair over. You're saying the guy left burning footprints? Maybe it's a trick. Heated boots, some pyro setup. Then where's the gear? He left nothing. No prints, no fibers, no smoke canister. Just that song. Ray stared at the photo, chewing her pen cap. You ever hear of the Ventura arsons last year? Houses burned from the inside out. Same residue. Case never solved. Pat looked up. You're kidding. Nope. And Christmas week too. That night, Birchwood Lane felt empty. Most neighbors had fled to relatives' homes or hotels. Only the Ramirez house remained under police watch. The family had been relocated, but Pat couldn't shake the feeling someone or something was still there. Around midnight, he drove back, headlights sweeping across the quiet cul-de-sac. Snowflakes caught the beams like ash. He parked, stepped out, and listened. Nothing but the ticking of his engine. He checked the perimeter again. The windows reflected his flashlight, dull and harmless. Then, as he passed the living room window, the light flickered, not from his beam, but from inside. He froze. A faint red glow pulsed behind the curtains. Pat reached for his radio. Unit 12 to dispatch. I've got movement inside Birchwood address. The radio hissed, then went dead. He pulled his gun, moved toward the door. The knob was cold enough to sting his palm. When he pushed it open, the smell hit him first, a sharp, acrid odor of burnt pine. The living room was dark except for the tree, still plugged in, its lights blinking weakly. Beneath it lay the music box. It shouldn't have been there. The evidence techs had taken it. It was open again, spinning. Silent Night. Holy. The tune warped, slowing, reversing. The red glow came from inside its gears, a tiny ember pulsing in rhythm. Pat took one cautious step forward. The ember flared bright, casting shadows that stretched across the walls. Shadows shaped like boots, like a broad figure stooping beneath the ceiling. Then the ember went dark. The house returned to silence. Pat backed out slowly, locking the door behind him. His breath fogged in the cold. He didn't radio it in. He couldn't yet put into words what he'd seen. But he knew one thing for sure. Whoever had worn that Santa suit wasn't finished. The next morning, Ray found him in his office, eyes bloodshot. He handed her the lab update. Note: thermal residue on music box impossible to reproduce under normal conditions. Object now cool. No damage evident. She frowned. Meaning? Pat leaned back. Meaning it burned at 900 degrees last night, and now it's fine. Tell me how that happens. Before she could answer, the phone on his desk rang. He picked up. Static, then a faint jingle of bells. A pause, and a voice, soft, distant, the same hollow timbre Letitia had described. Detective, have you been good this year? The line went dead. The Ramirez case had been open for a week, and Birchwood Lane was already back to normal, or at least pretending. The news vans were gone. The inflatable reindeer stood again, patched with duct tape. But Detective Pat Holloway hadn't slept. Every night since the call, he dreamed of snow turning to ash, of red glowing footprints melting into the street. Each time he woke, The same tune played faintly in his head. Silent Night, slowed and backwards. On his desk sat the photo of the footprints. Beside it, a manila folder thick with reports. At the top, scrawled in his own handwriting, the list. Ray dropped a cardboard box onto his desk. Pulled everything from cold cases that mentioned Santa suits, she said. Pat flipped through the files. Ventura, 2018. Arson, 9 dead. Tacoma, 2020. Costume, found in debris. Aurora, 2023. Witness described man in red with burning boots. 3 states, 5 years apart, Ray said. Every Christmas Eve. Same residue, same vanished suspect. Pat exhaled. We're not looking for a copycat. We're looking for a recurrence. Of what? A ghost in a rental suit. He didn't answer. He just pointed to the victims' names. Each family had one link. A recent divorce or custody battle finalized within months of the attack. Whoever, or whatever, this thing is, it doesn't pick random homes. It finds people who hate each other. The precinct archive smelled of paper and mildew. Down here, fluorescent lights hummed like insects. Pat pulled microfilm reels from a dusty drawer labeled Holiday Incidents, Historical. Ray scrolled through headlines projected on the wall. Greater than 1959, Santa shooter still at large. 1934, Yuletide arson claims family of 5. 1887, St. Nicholas brings fire, not gifts. The phrasing changed, but the pattern didn't. Ray whispered, he's been doing this for more than a century. Pat nodded slowly. Or he's something that wears the same face every time. Among the clippings was a handwritten note, decades old. The Clausen Specter appears to the wicked in red garments, punishes false joy. A librarian's signature trail beneath it. Dr. Evelyn Hartwell, retired folklore professor. Pat tracked her down to a nursing home in Pasadena. She was 93, eyes sharp behind thick glasses. When he showed her the note, she smiled faintly. So he's back again, she said. Ooh, the Clausen Specter, old European legend, migrated with settlers. Not St. Nicholas, but his shadow. When people celebrate without kindness, he comes dressed as the gift giver to collect the debt. Ray folded her arms. You think a myth's walking around burning houses? The old woman's gaze didn't waver. You think myths don't need bodies to walk? They borrow ours. They find the angry, the broken, the ones who wish harm, and whisper, let me help you give them what they deserve. Pat felt a chill climb his spine. Can it be stopped? Only by ending the wish that invited him. That night, as rain turned the snow to slush, Pat sat in his car outside the Ramirez rental. The family had moved again. Still, the lights inside flickered occasionally, though the power was off. His phone buzzed once, an unknown number. He answered, the same faint jingle of bells. Then a whisper, Detective, you're on the list. He slammed the phone shut, heart hammering. In the reflection of the windshield, he saw it, a red shape, distant, half hidden between 2 street lamps. Watching, he started the engine, headlights cutting through the mist. But when the beams hit the spot, there was nothing there, just a patch of steam rising from the wet pavement, as if snow were burning from beneath. Back at the precinct, Pat printed the names of every family tied to the old cases. Next to each, he wrote the date of the divorce filings, the number of dependents, the time of the attacks. A pattern emerged like a countdown spiral. At the center sat a blank square. December 24th, 2025, TBD. Ray looked over his shoulder. So who's next? Pat's eyes drifted to his own divorce decree pinned above his desk, signed 3 months earlier. He didn't answer. Just before dawn, the precinct power flickered. A smell of burnt pine wafted through the vents. From somewhere deep in the evidence room, a faint mechanical tune began to play. Silent Night in reverse. Pat grabbed his gun and ran. The lights strobed red, emergency circuits kicking in. On the concrete floor, glowing footprints led toward the exit. Ray's voice echoed down the hall. "Pat, where are you?" He turned the corner and stopped. The double doors to the parking lot stood open, snow blowing in. And there, just beyond them, a tall figure in a scorched red coat lifted its head slowly, bells jingling with each motion. In its hand it held a sheet of paper. It let go, and the wind carried it to Pat's feet. He looked down. It was a list. Every name crossed out except one. Holloway, Patrick. The figure tilted its head, the same way the intruder had done at the Ramirez door. "Have you been good this year?" it asked. Pat raised his weapon, but the words wouldn't come. The world dimmed around the crimson shape, the air vibrating like heat above asphalt. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw faces within the red. Every victim's reflection, eyes wide and burning. Then the figure vanished, leaving only the faint smell of smoke and a single scorched snowflake drifting down. Pat Holloway hadn't gone home in 3 days. He lived now on the smell of burnt coffee and adrenaline, surrounded by files that didn't explain anything. Every note he read led back to the same sentence, scribbled in the margins of an old report. "It comes for those who wish harm." He replayed that moment in the hallway. Red coat, burning snow, his own name on the list. He'd told no one except Ray, and even she was starting to think the strain had broken him. "Pat," she said quietly, setting a paper cup on his desk. "We need sleep, not mythology." He looked up. "You didn't see it." "No," she admitted, "but I've seen what grief does. You keep reading these files, and you start breathing their smoke." He wanted to argue, but didn't. Outside, rain tapped the windows in slow rhythm, and for a moment it almost sounded like distant bells. In a box marked Ventura, 2018, Ray found an unlogged cassette. The label was nearly faded, but one word remained: confession. They threaded it through the precinct's last working recorder. A man's voice came through, rough with static. He said he could help me make them understand. All I had to do was wish. He came to the door and read, smiling. Then the fire. A click, then silence. Ray froze. "You think it's the same voice?" Pat nodded slowly. The tone was eerily calm, like someone describing a dream they hadn't yet realized was real. "Where'd this come from?" he asked. "Filed anonymously. No return address." By noon, they had traced the tape's postal barcode to a locker complex on the city's east side. The air there was heavy with wet asphalt and the sweet rot of discarded furniture. Locker 317 opened easily. Inside, an old typewriter, a stack of photographs, and, resting atop them, another music box, identical to the one from the Ramirez house. Pat hesitated before winding it. "If it starts playing, I'm done," Ray muttered. It didn't play. Instead, a thin sheet of paper slid out from under the lid, folded twice. Typed across it. To stop him, someone must undo the wish that summoned him. The wish always belongs to the survivor. Pat's throat went dry. "The survivor," he whispered. "Letitia. They found her living 2 towns away, in a motel whose neon sign flickered between vacancy and simply ANCY. She looked older, brittle. Katrina sat near the window, coloring quietly, her scars faded but visible. Letitia didn't want to talk until Pat placed the paper on the table. "He said you were the only one left," Pat said gently. "Did you ever wish for something? Anything you'd take back?" Her eyes filled slowly. "After the divorce papers came through, I was angry. I remember saying I wish David could feel the pain he gave us. That's all. Just words. Did anyone hear you?" She nodded. "A man at the courthouse steps. He wore a red scarf. He smiled and said, 'Be careful what you gift.' I thought it was a joke." Ray exhaled softly. And a week later, The fire, Letitia finished. You think I made him come? Pat didn't answer. Outside, snow began to fall again, slow and heavy. Each flake that hit the motel window melted into tiny scorch marks, dark against the glass. That night, Pat drove alone. His divorce decree sat on the passenger seat, the ink still fresh. He'd been angry, too, at his ex-wife, at the world, at himself. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was how the thing found him. He pulled onto the shoulder of Birchwood Lane. The houses were dark except for one faint red light glowing in the Ramirez living room. He stepped inside. The music box waited on the mantel, lid closed. His reflection looked back from the polished brass. Tired eyes, gun at his hip, the ghost of a man who'd spent too long chasing something he couldn't explain. He spoke into the empty room. I take it back. The box clicked once. No music, just a release of air like a sigh. The red light faded. Then, from somewhere behind him, a voice. Too late, detective. The figure stood where the doorway met the dark, taller than before, edges flickering like heat. It wasn't quite Santa now. Its beard was smoke, its suit a shifting pattern of ash and embers. Pat lifted his weapon. You used me. I only grant what's wished for, it said. You wanted to end the pain. Now I can. Behind it, shapes moved, flickers of the faces from every case file. Families he'd seen in photographs, all glowing faintly red. Pat lowered the gun. Then take me. Leave them. The specter tilted its head. That's not how gifts work. The room filled with the sound of distant sleigh bells, slow and discordant. Heat rolled from the walls. Ornaments burst silently on the tree. Pat closed his eyes and thought of snow, of calm, of forgiveness. No more hate, he whispered. No more wishes. The music box sprang open. A single note of Silent Night rang clear, and everything went still. When Ray arrived minutes later, the house was cold, untouched. Pat's car idled in the driveway, headlights washing over undisturbed snow. Inside, on the mantel, the music box rested open. Inside its lid, someone had typed one last line, the wish undone. And beside it, a scrap of paper fluttered in the heat vent's draft. The list, every name crossed out, including Holloway, Patrick. The precinct looked different after the Ramirez case closed. Boxes disappeared from desks. Christmas decorations came down, and everyone pretended nothing strange had happened. Officially, the file read unfounded disturbance. Detective Ray Miller knew better. Pat Holloway's name had been erased from the roster 3 days after the Birchwood Lane incident. No body, no resignation letter. Just gone. The chief called it personal leave, then avoided her eyes. At first, Ray told herself she could move on. She told the same thing to the department counselor, to her husband, to the mirror. But sleep wouldn't stay. Each night she heard it. The faint jingle of bells somewhere in the distance. The hiss of snow melting where it shouldn't. She stopped telling anyone. 2 weeks later, a parcel arrived at her apartment. No return address, no postage stamp. Just her name, written on a tag that smelled faintly of smoke. Inside was the music box. She didn't open it at first. She locked it in a desk drawer, then another. Still at night, she heard it ticking softly through the wood, winding itself. Finally, one dawn, she snapped. She took it to the precinct evidence furnace and tossed it in. The flames licked around the brass, bright and hungry. When she looked again, it wasn't there. Ray started seeing reflections that didn't match. In glass doors, in the windshield, in the coffee pot at the station. Just for a heartbeat, someone else's eyes staring back. She told herself it was exhaustion. Then she began finding ash on her desk each morning, fine and gray, shaped almost like footprints. Her therapist called it transference of guilt. She wanted to believe him until she saw the handwriting on her case notes change. Looping, careful, old-fashioned typewriter script. Have you been good this year? ? Christmas approached again. She left town, rented a cabin in the mountains. No decorations, no lights. Just snow and silence. On Christmas Eve, she woke to a knock at the door. No footsteps outside. No shadow through the frosted glass. Just the faint smell of burnt pine and the echo of a music box winding down. She opened the door anyway. Nothing. Only snow falling in slow spirals, covering the path. She exhaled, a shaky laugh escaping. "You're gone," she whispered. "It's over." But when she closed the door, the lock was warm under her hand, as though someone had just touched it from the other side. Weeks later, hikers found an unmarked envelope wedged in a tree near the cabin road. Inside was a single sheet of paper typed in that same mechanical font. The wish undone. The witness chosen. No signature. No fingerprints. Ray Miller was never seen again. Her apartment remained neat except for one thing. On the coffee table, a snow globe. When shaken, it played a few warped notes of Silent Night. And within the swirling white flakes, if you looked long enough, you could almost make out a small red figure trudging through the snow.